I got to watch Christopher Nolan's The Odyssey early, so here are my full spoiler-free thoughts on the best and worst parts of the film. And I'm just gonna get straight to the point and tell you guys that I think this movie is absolutely amazing. It's easily my favorite movie of 2026 so far, and I honestly did not know that Christopher Nolan had a movie like this in him, because not only is this film a lot darker and more relentless than anything he's made in the past, but this is also the first time we see Christopher Nolan go fully into the fantasy genre and just fully embrace the mythological elements of a story, and he absolutely nails it. Like, don't worry, he doesn't tone down or try to make anything more realistic in the story. But even though I keep talking about how new and different this is for Christopher Nolan, I also feel like he's the only director alive that could have pulled off this film in the amazing fashion that he did, because it genuinely feels like his entire career has been leading him up to this point. I genuinely think this is the most emotional Christopher Nolan movie since Interstellar. I think it has a lot of the same messaging and consequences as Oppenheimer. You'll know what I'm talking about when you watch the film. There's also lots of stuff with memory and time in this movie that reminded me a lot of Memento, and Inception is also just a straight up war movie with the intensity of Dunkirk. But all of those elements blend into this feeling like something brand new for Nolan. But I also need to highlight the acting performances in this movie. If you don't know, Matt Damon plays Odysseus, who's obviously the main character of the Odyssey. The entire story is pretty much him after the Trojan War, trying to get home, but he's lost at sea. And this movie is absolutely full to the brim with amazing performances from pretty much like every supporting actor in the cast. But I need to give Matt Damon his flowers, because obviously as the main character, the entire weight of this story and it connecting emotionally with the audience pretty much relies on him and Anne Hathaway's character as like the two pillars of this film, and they absolutely nail it. The biggest compliment I can give to Matt Damon in this movie is that I literally forgot I was watching Matt Damon. Like, he genuinely transforms into this character. He has multiple of the best moments of the entire film. There's a specific monologue he gives very late towards the end of this film that is genuinely one of the best scenes I've seen all year long. Zendaya as Athena has a very small role, which is very true to the Odyssey original story, so it's not like she was a real standout performance or anything, because she just generally does not have that much to do. But I will say there is something that Christopher Nolan does in this story with the character of Athena that's not in the original source material that I also thought was an absolutely brilliant choice that adds so much into this story. While I'm talking about performances, Robert Pattinson as Antinous, kind of like our main antagonist in this film, is just amazing as always. Like, this guy is seriously one of the best actors in Hollywood right now. He plays this role so maniacally evil, but also like cowardice at the same time. Just a super layer performance, but he is so incredible. He just eats up the scenery every time he's on the screen. Now, the one performance I was kind of underwhelmed by is Tom Holland as Telemachus. Now, it's not like he's bad in this movie at all. He does a very good job, but I saw multiple reports coming out and early reviews saying that like, oh, this is by far and away the best performance of Tom Holland's career. And I understand he hasn't had that much of an acting career outside of the Spider-Man films, but I'm not gonna lie, I think he has moments in like Spider-Man No Way Home that are more emotional and better than stuff he does in the Odyssey. Again, he's not bad. He doesn't take me out of the movie at all, and it's a very good performance. But I've seen people being like, oh, he's going to be nominated for Best Supporting Actor. I don't see that happening personally. Anne Hathaway as Penelope also just has a few standout scenes that just completely stopped the theater dead, and everyone was just like awestruck at what they were watching just because of her performance and the way she delivers some of these lines. Really powerful stuff here. The biggest surprise of the entire cast for me was John Leguizamo. He plays this role so unbelievably perfectly, and he is honestly the heart and core of the story at so many different points, which I was not expecting, but he absolutely blows us out of the water. The best I've ever seen him in any movie ever. I also want to give a huge shout out to Elliot Page. It's a smaller role in the film. I don't know if their character has been publicly announced. I'm not going to say who it is in case it hasn't to spoil that, but no, they are not Achilles like everybody was crying about. But Christopher Nolan does something so smart with Elliot Page's character in this film that ties the emotions of this film together so perfectly at the end. Again, it's a very small role, but it's crucial for the ending of this film. Moving on from the acting performances, on a technical level, obviously this movie is amazing, like all Christopher Nolan films are. Like, it looks incredible. I think the set and costume design is amazing. I don't care about the armor not being historically accurate, particularly because this exact suit of armor you see here is a part of one of the coolest looking scenes I've ever seen in my life. The aura was off the charts. Really, the entire movie looks incredible. The cinematography's off the charts. Hoyte absolutely killed it, and which shouldn't be a surprise to anybody, but the musical score by Ludwig is absolutely off the charts in this, because it's one of the most unique scores I've heard in years. If you didn't know, they actually use like tons of new instruments and try to find things that would be used in ancient times, so you do not hear a lot of instruments you normally hear in musical scores for films, and it makes this a very unique sounding film. And I promise I do actually have a few nitpicks and complaints I'll get to in a minute, but first I want to say I think actually one of, if not the very best thing about Christopher Nolan's The Odyssey is the things he changes or adds into the source material. And I know whenever you say that, people get very worried, rightfully so. I think most times you should just stick to the source material. You gotta trust my word, and you gotta trust Christopher Nolan's storytelling capabilities. He does not change or ruin anything in the story. All he does is add in some Nolanisms that absolutely make this hit 10 times harder, takes a newer angle where it's more about grief and being like anti-war in a way. And like I said, there's a few things he does with a couple minor supporting characters in this movie that get a little bit bigger role than they do in the original epic poem, or at least the translations that I've read. And I genuinely just believe these things that Nolan added in just take the story to the next level. And moving on to some of my minor complaints and nitpicks about this movie, I do think it takes a little bit to get going. The first 30 minutes, honestly, I was a little unsure about like what Nolan was doing with this story. There was just nothing like mind-blowing in the first 30 minutes. There's nothing bad in it again. And I think a part of that is just how grand and epic the scale of this movie is, how many characters you're dealing with here, how many different time periods you're jumping in between. There is a lot of setup that has to happen. So I'm kind of interested to see on rewatch if I mind the first 30 minutes as much as I did the first time, knowing where the story ends up and how Nolan perfectly wraps everything up. But don't let that deter you, because literally it's the first 30 minutes and that's it. Because like the rest of the 2 hours remaining in the movie after that, it feels like Christopher Nolan hit an absolute filmmaking flow state where every single scene just keeps getting better and better and better until you get to the end of the movie and your mind is just absolutely blown. My only other complaint is kind of early on as well, is that I think a few scenes are in the trailer and obviously in the very famous story. So these are like very, very minor spoilers. They're just things that happen. There's a scene with a Cyclops and larger than normal men in the story. And I think both of those went on a little bit too long. Again, both of the scenes on their own were incredible, but the Cyclops one in particular, it felt like I was watching that for like 15 minutes. But even with these minor complaints, I was walking into the theater and I was like, oh, do I want to be a little critical? I'm kind of thinking like a 9 out of 10. But after looking at other films from this year, like Project Hail Mary and Obsession, that I both gave a 9 out of 10 and absolutely loved, I just got to be honest with myself. Even with some of the flaws I have, this hit me harder than any other film I've watched this year. And like I said, after that first 30 minutes, Nolan just enters a godlike state of filmmaking. I have to give this a perfect 10 out of 10. I'd really appreciate it if you consider becoming a channel member. For a few bucks a month, you'll get to see my spoiler versions of movie reviews where I go into specific details and scene breakdowns of what I loved and didn't like. If you want to see all my other movie reviews on the channel, click the playlist above my head right now, and thank you for watching.